Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome back to another video from PM Problems, the website and channel dedicated primarily to project management and construction management, but with a grander emphasis, or a more broad emphasis, I should say, on professional and personal development. And I'm sharing something that's a bit of a life lesson I've learned over the years, and something that I think is pretty applicable to the general state of the world today. This can apply to family members, people within your community, people within your school system or a teacher, certainly coworkers or people in your professional space, and even on a grander stage in terms of political figures or people in media, people of influence, etc. And before I get into that topic, I just want to say that I'm trying to do as many videos as I can that speak to a general audience that kind of involve passing on life skills and life lessons that I've learned, many of which have been the hard way, if I'm being honest. So I don't want that to be the case for you. I want to be able to share these life lessons and life experiences that I've had to benefit as many people as possible, because I feel like without talking about these things and kind of doing a deeper dive, even if it's a relatively brief deeper dive, like a couple minute video, for example, I think just passing the ideas along and sharing the information goes a long way. And in that regard, I will personally share my own experience for when I've kind of learned this lesson, at least in the professional space, and why I think it's important that we all have to kind of uh, keep this in mind. Because even if something is logically sound, our ego can often betray us in that regard and make us feel and therefore act in ways we otherwise might not if we were looking at it with a clear state of mind. And without further ado, today's topic is sometimes people we don't like are right. It's very difficult, for myself included, to fully embody this life lesson because, like I said before, our ego does not like it one bit. Mine certainly doesn't as well. When it comes to people we don't like, we tend to resist them at any and all cost. Often, responding to them in a way we wouldn't to somebody that we felt neutral about, even if they said the exact same thing. It's very difficult to want to validate somebody when we don't like them on a personal level, or if we strongly feel that we don't align in some fundamental way. And why this hurts us specifically is because we'll often cut off our own nose to spite our face, as the expression goes, just to be able to disagree with that person, or stick it to them in some way, or resist them in some way. For example, if somebody we don't like, or let's say a family member at a family gathering that we don't see very often, uh, gives us life advice. But if we don't like that person, we tend to want to resist the advice. But the problem with that is that if somebody gives us good advice and we resist it, we really only hurt ourselves. The ego kind of tricks us into thinking that we're gaining some upper hand, we're gaining the higher ground when we do so, but we're really just harming ourselves by not taking good advice. So I'll give you a brief backstory of when I kind of like really embodied this lesson, or when I felt I really took this lesson on board, is when I was working as a project manager, actually, several years ago. Actually, you could say this probably goes back maybe 10 years ago or more. So I've been a project manager in construction for 15 years, and I've worked at three companies in that time. The second company I worked in was a national company, great company. I have nothing bad to say about them as an operation, and I had many great coworkers and whatnot. But I did have one boss who was particularly bad in that time. He was kind of a manager of our entire office, and oversaw several project managers, and kind of was like the big boss of our division. Kind of he was the representative of our division to the corporate office, and basically he kind of called the shots insofar as what actually happened on projects, and he had the power to sign contracts and things like that. So without belaboring the point here, he was a real piece of work. I've actually done videos with this boss of mine in mind. You can check it out on my channel. I did a video several years back, which is kind of showing its age in a funny way, although the information is still good. And the video is titled "Is My Boss Manipulating Me?" So that same person who I spoke about in that video, I'll be talking about briefly here. I truly believe he took joy in causing suffering of others. I don't mean physical suffering or anything like that. I mean professional suffering in the workplace and whatnot. He would make it a point to yell in meetings and point out where other people made mistakes, and he would kind of just go, I believe, go as far as to sabotage people or set people up to fail, things like that. I don't want to get too far into the weeds because this is supposed to be a more general video. But in so many words, I really didn't get along with this guy on a personal level, and I don't think he got along with me very much on a personal level. I will say that I had a great relationship with many coworkers, whereas we all kind of, let's say, we all were in the same boat when it came to dealing with this boss of ours. We all kind of saw him as a jerk, to say the least. But I feel like some of us got it a lot worse than others, and myself being one of those people. For whatever reason, I don't know if it's just personal insecurity. I think he had some issues growing up, at home and with his own father and things like that. So he kind of took out his problems on the rest of the world. And I will say, in fairness to him, he wasn't necessarily a terrible person all the time. But when he wanted to be, if he was in a bad mood or whatever was going on in his personal life, if he wanted to be, a pain in the neck to deal with, to say the absolute least, he was great at it. Got to give him credit for it. But one of the things that I found myself doing in these situations was, if he kind of gave a suggestion on how to run a project a certain way or run a part of a project in a certain way, I felt the inner desire to kind of like, in so many words, resist what he was doing. I didn't want to give him any credit for having good ideas when I felt as though we paid a high price for so many of the mistakes that he made, and he would intentionally not give us credit whenever, not whenever, but in many cases when we deserved it. He would take credit for things. He kind of kept us all separate from his relationship with the corporate office. Excuse me. So a lot of times they just saw what was happening on paper and didn't know the nuances of, what a pain in the what this guy was to deal with. Uh, so in so many words, he would give advice because he had to, and that would include telling people what to do on certain projects, but also telling people what they were individually doing wrong. Now, I'm going to be the first to say that I'm no saint. I've learned a lot over the years. I've made many mistakes in my career, of course, which all contributed to developing and getting better. Um, but he kind of, I think he took joy in rubbing people's mistakes in their faces, because I think that's what he experienced as a younger man himself. And he had never really processed that trauma, like I said, with his own father and whatnot. Not to share too much personal information or anything, but regardless, the lesson I learned was that he was right about some things a fair amount of the time, but I felt a deep resistance into like not wanting to give him credit. It was to the point if he was trying to tell me that the sky was blue, I'd want to tell him it was green, or I'd want to disagree with him somehow, just because he was just such an awful person on an individual level, or at least could be. And that's something that I think I've definitely learned over the years, dealing with him and reflecting back and other times, even with people from the past. I realized I made a big mistake, and I was not able to separate my emotions from my logic in those cases, which I think is something many of us do now, whether it be, like I said, at work or in our personal lives, or even in the way we view grander events or people on a higher stage. Is that it's kind of this catch 22, or this trick of the mind, where by not giving people that we don't like credit when they deserve it, we actually hurt ourselves more in the process. But we think we're doing ourselves more of a favor, or we're somehow taking that person down a peg, or giving them what they deserve, etc. You get the idea. But why I think this is so important is because we have to be able to generally separate ourselves from our ego, and I think our egos are causing a lot of harm in the world today, by and large. Uh, let's talk political figures without giving any names or picking any sides or anything. When there's somebody of influence on a political stage, or a quasi political stage, let's say they're working in media, or it's a media agency in itself, they're never going to be wrong all the time. Even people we despise are going to be correct about some things. Even people who are maybe silly, to put it nicely, they're going to still be right about some things sometimes. So I just ask you to ponder this question, as I've pondered myself many times over the years: is what do we ultimately gain by not giving somebody credit, even if it's in our own mind, just even an acknowledgement in our own mind, when somebody is correct about something, regardless of how we feel about them? we really don't gain anything by resisting this advice. And what I'm speaking to here is more of an individual exercise that I think would be valuable for you, the viewer, to practice if you don't already. And I continue to practice myself is just to meditate on the idea of what do we feel we are losing if we do acknowledge that somebody we don't like is correct. Because at least in my experience, these insecurities or this resistance to giving anyone that we don't like credit stems from something much deeper, of course. Uh, at least in my case, I didn't feel as though that person had the right to tell me when I was wrong. That person being my former boss, because I felt as though personally, if I'm being honest, that I was doing more net positive by a long shot than I was net negative. So I didn't really appreciate hearing criticism, especially from somebody that I personally didn't respect in a business sense and felt it made a lot of mistakes and didn't take ownership for them himself. But that said, he would give good advice sometimes, and I should have, in hindsight, been more open to some of these constructive criticisms, you might say, or even just advice, whether it be again on a personal level or a professional level. When I say personal level, I mean personal skills. Speak such and such way. You have to lead in a certain way. Those would be the personal level, and professional level would be, you know, uh, this project is an XYZ situation. You should consider doing A, B, or C. Because I feel that listening to our ego in the vast majority of situations is kind of like the tail wagging the dog, in a sense that we are given logic as human beings that we can make great use of. We can use for our absolute highest abilities, you could say, or to bring out our highest abilities. But the ego kind of holds that back. The ego tends to look for any threat to itself coming from outside, real or perceived, and feels the need to deal with it in a way that logically is completely unnecessary. Like we said before, there's literally zero benefit to, at least in our own minds, acknowledging when somebody we don't like is correct, because we only stand to benefit and we only stand to lose if we don't take the advice. And as a people, a collective people, if we're going to continue to improve into the future and make greater strides as a society, or uh, improve our professional skills, just generally get better at handling our emotions and thinking more critically and thinking more logically, we have to be able to keep the ego in check. It's absolutely essential. And I'm speaking from personal experience here when I say that I've not done this many times over the years, and there are times that I can look back on and think, wow, I was foolish for not taking that advice, or I was foolish for not acknowledging when this person said X, Y, or Z to me, and they were making a valid point, even if I didn't want to hear it. Nonetheless, from the person who was giving the advice. Um, so I certainly don't want that for you, the viewer or the subscriber to the channel. If you're into that sort of thing, I want only the best for myself, of course, but everybody in this community or anybody who's going to watch this video. This is kind of a shapeless video in so many words because clearly I'm speaking unscripted and more of a conversational format, which is a bit different than what I normally do on this channel. Um, but I just generally implore you to strongly consider this when you're hearing an opinion from a source that you might not like. So, this idea of resisting advice from somebody we don't like, that's good advice, is kind of in harmony with the idea of throwing out the validity of an entire person's viewpoint or entire person's opinion on something because they say one thing or they have one quality that we don't like. Uh, for example, you might be listening to a lecture of a popular person of influence on YouTube, as a matter of fact, and you might generally be nodding along, or at least open to what they're saying, or generally, let's say, taking in the advice, taking in their opinion as much as you can. But they get to a certain part in their speech, and they say something you completely disagree with, and we have the tendency to think like, "That's it." I'm not listening to this person. I don't want to listen to this person anymore. Everything they're saying is wrong. But that actually isn't the case at all. It's really just one or two things, or let's say a handful of things, or even one thing that that person feels or says, or a quality of theirs that we don't like, and we tend to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We say nothing they're saying matters. I don't want to hear anything they have to say anymore because they said or did one thing that we don't like. Um, and I just implore you, the viewer or the listener, is to ask yourself what you gain from that, because it's a knee jerk sort of reaction. That's the thing about the ego is it tends to, at least in my opinion, it tends to kind of appear before thoughts can form. It's an emotional reaction. It's a knee jerk reaction, like I said, um, that really, if you actually think about it, has no constructive value to ours whatsoever. The ego is kind of a self defense mechanism of sorts, a survival mechanism, really. But in more modern times, it tends to be at least a defensive mechanism, in my experience. Um, and so, when you hear somebody give advice you don't like, or similarly, when somebody is presenting an opinion on something and part of it you don't like, I just ask yourself, what is the value in throwing it all away versus saying, okay, well, maybe this one part of them I don't like, or I generally don't like this person, but the advice is pretty good in this specific situation. Or that person who's presenting the information in a video or a political figure, etc., they said or did this one thing that I really don't like, or they have this one core value that I don't harmonize with at all. But a lot of what they're saying has value to it. So I will take that advice on board and still disagree with them or still dislike the person. Doesn't mean we have to throw it all away. It's this black and white thinking that I think is a big part of a big problem in society now. It serves no real purpose. It's very tribal to look at the world that way. And generally speaking, I think that we would all be better off, whether it be on a local scale, like we said before, a family member, or in our workplace, or on a grander scale, kind of compartmentalizing advice or opinions or belief systems from people we listen to, particularly ones that we might not agree with or we might even personally dislike, uh, is to just break it down into parts and in so many words, pick the best and leave the rest. You know, it's something that I've been doing a lot in the last several years. I think it's helped me out quite a bit. It's something I even did with my boss in the workplace that I was speaking of before. Is it got to a point where we would have a reasonable working relationship because I think I matured and he might have even realized the folly of his ways, after a few specific disagreements where I kind of called him out on this. And, we generally both, let's say, we were never best friends or anything, but we had a much better working relationship when I tried to at least listen to him when he would give advice. And, I would try to at least take on board things that he would say and not resist so much otherwise good advice because I didn't like him as an individual person. So I think I implore you, the viewer, to do this as much as possible and to think of maybe a specific instance or two in your life in the recent past, the last couple of weeks, maybe the past couple of days, uh, where you might be interfacing or interacting with somebody that you don't like, or you hear an opinion on TV or whatever from somebody you don't like, and you might have immediately dismissed it. But in reality, is everything they're saying wrong? Is everything that person's saying, or is every viewpoint that that person has wrong, or is it just certain ones? Because, like I said before, uh, there's really no net benefit to us individually, even to completely dismiss somebody because we don't like who they are on a certain level, and therefore we think to ourselves, nothing this person says could have any value whatsoever. So I hope you enjoyed this video. It's short and sweet. It's a little bit different from my norm. I'm trying out various formats and to see what resonates the most, and to generally speak to the audience that I would like to. I would love to have viewed this channel more often. So, what do you think? Is this video format any better from a typical scripted video that's a little more structured, or do you prefer something structured, like I said? So that's what I wanted to talk about in this video, is something a little more broad, a little bit more applicable to all aspects of life rather than specifically in workplace, much less specific to project management and construction management, although those are the focus of this channel. I do feel that speaking about topics like this are beneficial both for those communities and young professionals or anybody really who could stand to benefit from this information. So, by all means, let me know in the comments below, what do you think about this kind of free form, non scripted format versus my more typical kind of structured format where I go point by point, bullet by bullet. And before we go, I want to mention that I offer one on one virtual mentorship and coaching for professionals. I offer both 30 and 60-minute Zoom sessions. If that's something you're interested in, check out the link in the description below. Where you can get more information about it or book a session at your convenience. As I said before, I do tend to focus on project management and construction management as I am an engineer by trade. But I'm certainly open to doing more general coaching calls, general professional one-on-one mentorship and one-on-one coaching sessions for people of all various backgrounds. So I certainly don't want to be exclusionary, even despite my specific expertise. So if you enjoyed today's video, please give it a like or a share with somebody you think would find it valuable. And a comment with your feedback is always appreciated as well. And last but not least, if you'd like to stay in touch in the future, please consider subscribing to the channel. Your support means a lot to me, and I would love to see this channel grow with a community of more and more young professionals where we can continue to talk about as many topics as I can possibly fit in the video format going forward. So with all that said, this is PM Problems signing off, and until next time, cheers.